Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. I'm your host, Janet Kira Lesson, with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson, and this is an episode of We the Anunnaki with our special guests, Emily Elizabeth Windsor-Cragg and Glenn Bogue. And we've got a lot we're going to talk about today, and I don't have it really pulled up because I was really busy, but I'm going to bring on Emily and Glenn. Let's see if this will work here. Oh, Sasha, before we start, what would you like to say about what's going on with the Anunnaki this week?
Oh, okay.
What about your research? What are you discovering?
Oh, I've been working on Stonehenge and how Lockerbie had discovered how, especially when you had to determine latitude, people that made these sacred sites, basically Thoth or Nagashita, you could adjust a certain amount, like one ring of Stonehenge, and then you had to move the blue stones out and totally relocate them to make sight lines. In other words, you kept adjusting wherever the megalithic observatory was to the latitude, and so you could tell when, because of the cycles of the movement of Earth through the precession of equinoxes and stuff, you can tell when that was built. And so the phases of Stonehenge are just there. And it's like the Anunnaki left these all over the world, these calendar computers for us, basically, and and they could account for the apparent movement of the stars, as well as the different. Every time the moon seemed to change its apparent place, and as well as the equinoxes, and it's incredible. And they gave us the basis of our mathematics and everything that that our intellect has to this day.
Oh, that's so
interesting.
Cool.
So you have some articles you put up on Facebook and on AnkiSpeaks.com.
It's called Stonehenge.
On AnkiSpeaks.com. All right. Well, we'll talk about more of that later on in today's episode. We're going to be here for 2 hours. We've got Emily here for the total 2 hours, and Glenn is here for the first hour. And I know that we had Emily and Glenn on last week, and Dr. Lesson wasn't here last week, but Emily wants to introduce the subject. But Emily, when you start, Glenn has a few questions for you. So
good. Let's start with Glenn.
So Glenn, would you like to check in?
Well, I would hope that tonight is if it's even a shadow of last Friday, Emily. It was so enjoyable meeting you, and I wrote to Janet and said the next day, it was like riding a wild bronco.
Yeah, it was fun.
It was because the area was so new to me about Erishkigal. I know who these people, who this person is, and in my history quite well in that area. But to hear you confirming things that I have to sometimes guess from where I am here in the eastern United States, I have to kind of guess my answers, and to hear you fill in the blanks was really quite rewarding. But when it comes to Hitler, this is where I started. Hitler was the main focus of my master's degree when I was in college in 20th century Europe. And when I got done all that work, and years later came across the image of Fatima, and that the woman who appeared as Fatima, in fact, predicted the entire course of 20th century Europe, including indirectly the coming of Hitler, that really piqued my attention. So now you're coming across with this message that the supposed genealogy of Hitler is wrong.
Oh, I mean, he's absolutely not a Rothschild. I have some pictures up in my book, Saints or Sons of Perdition, George V and Edward VIII. I did a study of the facial structure of the Windsors and the Rothschilds. So I have about 10 or 15 photos of Windsors in the top of the plate and the Rothschilds in the bottom of the plate with Hitler in the middle. And I said, okay, who does he look like?
Right.
And it's, I don't even have to say anything to anybody. It's so obvious. He doesn't look anything like any Rothschild. No.
Well, the purpose of the Rothschild delusion, let's call it that then, the disinformation.
No, it isn't disinformation because he was raised by Rothschilds, because he was conceived at the Order of the Bath initiation, 1888, of George, who was then the Duke of York, and they really didn't know who the father of the baby was.
Very
okay,
good.
and they've always assumed that he was a Rothschild. But if you look at the bone structure between the Windsors and the Rothschilds, there's absolutely no doubt he was a Windsor.
But when you say Windsor, that's a British name.
Okay,
mean,
he was
Hanover,
Saxe-Coburg Gotha. He
yeah.
was George V's illegitimate kid, born in 1889, 3 years before he married Maytech.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, plain as the nose on your face. And that's why they had to wear different facial hair. Because George didn't want, they didn't want to be identified as kin.
Because?
They were on different sides of the fence.
But two sides of the same family.
Yeah, two very antagonistic sides of the same family. And, of course, having been brought up with the Rothschilds in Bavaria under the tutelage of Kaiser Wilhelm. Okay, and Kaiser Wilhelm was kind of a nutcase. Adolf had some attitudes, okay, and he came to Britain in 1912 and stayed with his sister for a while and learned English supposedly at that time, and I'm certain he got in touch with his father at that time. Which was, I have no idea how that went, and I won't know till I see the diaries. But when Hitler went into the army, he became a messenger on a bicycle, just like his younger sibling, Edward, who was on the ground as a grenadier troop guard on the ground in World War I for 4 years and came back alive. And that
is Adolf Hitler being protected in any way?
I don't have that information. I don't have that information. But there was a parting of the ways when George changed the name of the family from Saxe-Coburg Gotha to Windsor. That was one break. And then...
And what was the reason behind doing that? Why did he do that?
Because George wanted to be popular with the British people. And the Germans were bad guys in the desire to separate England and Germany, because Germany was overcoming British economy, and they were competing, and George was under the influence of Lord Milner and the new one world order methodology, to have a one world order. And so he, by that ideology, it was necessary for him to remove as many of the monarchs in Northern Europe as he could. Now, he had another reason, because Alfred de Rothschild and Tsar Nicholas and Kaiser Wilhelm were all at that solstice 1888 Order of the Bath initiation of George when he was Duke of York.
Give me the attendees again with the Tsar Nicholas.
Tsar Nicholas, Kaiser Wilhelm, who were uncles of George, and Alfred de Rothschild were at the initiation at Bath, Germany, near Frankfurt, at the time that the servant girl of the Rothschilds was impregnated by George V.
As a ritual?
As a ritual. That was George's initiation. You know, those initiations are always sexual. And
well, tell us a little bit more about the initiation at the Bath. Can you give us a little, fill in the blanks there, because I'm not sure what that's about.
Studying the rituals of the secret societies, they all utilize the same terminologies, the same symbols, they just have different names. And all of those secret societies and chivalric orders have a sexual component to their initiations. And so Alfred de Rothschild brought a maid of one of his houses to the initiation, and she was the sexual object that George V was there to experience, and she got pregnant, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So, Ellen, this has nothing to do with her being physically in the home like an Arnold Schwarzenegger and his housemaid. This is somebody who's dragged either by their will or against their will to a foreign chamber, a ritual chamber, and is there part of a ceremony.
Well, maybe she was paid. Who knows?
Well, yeah, I'm just saying, but it doesn't happen in the Rothschild mansion.
No. It happened at Kaiser Wilhelm's new palace home at Bath, near Frankfurt, and this was his housewarming party over the solstice of 1888, and he invited the whole family. He invited Tsar Nicholas came, and the Duke of York came, and Albert Victor, the presumptive heir, came, and of course Alfred de Rothschild was there too, because he later blackmailed George V by sending him a gift about 1902 with the Order of the Bath insignia emblazoned with jewels just before George V's coronation. And he was reminding him that there was an obligation there, that if George V didn't mind, that event back in 1888 was going to be made known, and that would be very inconvenient for George, who, as you know, was a dope addict. He was a dope addict until he was crowned. And you can see in the royal photos up until that time, up until about 1909, in royal photos, George V is standing there with his eyes totally blitzed out, and his father, Edward VII, being the sturdy mariner, is sitting there in all his glory with his grandson Edward at his side. Meanwhile, George V is high as a kite, and you can just see that all over the place. So George V had a lot to hide. And Alfred de Rothschild made certain that George knew that he was beholden to him. Now, this is one reason why Tsar Nicholas came crashing down, and another reason why George V allowed Kaiser Wilhelm to be humiliated and taken out of power, didn't support him, because both of those men could blackmail him for having the older...
Practice, though, having these rituals where children were often conceived, because there's something about the rituals that increase the likelihood of conception. We hear about this all the time. So that's interesting that could be later used as blackmail against them.
Well, of course, that's exactly what it's used for, and that's how the finance people who run the secret societies control the monarchs, with blackmail.
But at these ceremonies, I have an inkling of an understanding, it's just small, that at these ceremonies it's done because you don't really know who the father is.
Well, and of course it took a long time for that to be visible.
Visible in the bone structures.
Yes. And so when somebody says to me, well, Adolf Hitler was a Rothschild, I say, excuse me? Have you looked at the bone structure of a dozen or so of the Rothschild men? And have you looked at the bone structure of the ones who call themselves Windsors now? George V has an identical hairline with Adolf Hitler at about the same age. Identical hairline. Okay, and their features, the shape of their face is the same, and they both have eyes set about the same. One has a larger nose than the other, but, they're obviously kin.
Okay.
And when you look at you've got to see the book Saints or Sons of Perdition. The plate is in there, and you just look at it and you go, no problem. You can see Hitler was not a Rothschild. There was no way.
That means, since they don't really care about who's the father, so what does the genetics really mean, a Rothschild or not a Rothschild, when they have these things going on all the time?
It means that Adolf Hitler, raised by the Rothschilds, was able to influence George V. later on when during World War I, when Edward VIII was out of town, he was on the ground either in the western flank of Italy or he was in Morocco. He was out of the way, and George V was basically dealing with Adolf.
Mhm.
So, and we don't know how that relationship consummated. We have no idea.
No. And what's your relationship with, is it Edward?
Well, Edward was my father.
Right. So that
means that Adolf Hitler was my uncle. And what's her name in Germany is my first cousin. Just like Elizabeth is my first cousin.
But so you met Adolf Hitler on many occasions?
No. Of course I haven't met him. He fled to Argentina in 1945 when I was a year old, and he has his own covert history that nobody's ever told, and lately it's starting to come up. And there's a wonderful summary of the non-disclosure issues since 1947, including what happened to Adolf Hitler, on the site called Veterans Today. This summary is written by Preston James, who's a PhD from the military domain. And it's just a wonderful summary of the questions and the answers that we do have about what contact do we have with the Nazis like Hitler, who were also in contact with the Anunnaki starting in the 1920s. When the Vril girls with their long hair channeled the designs for saucer craft that the Germans went to work on with Rothschild's money in the 1920s.
And your source for this, because you weren't born, your source for this is?
Veterans Today, Military Foreign Affairs Journal, veteranstoday.com, okay, and it's the... let me get the date on this particular article. Oh, it's a wonderful article.
Yeah.
It's the newest one.
James, yeah.
Yeah, it's the newest.
Because there is an allusion somewhere in my reading about the history of Argentina of this landing party arriving there, I guess by a submarine, I think.
Yes.
Hitler's party arrived there
disappeared, yeah.
Well into the woods in a well-prepared place there.
Yes, and there's also the stories of the Hollow Earth and the Antarctic bases of not only Nazis but of ETs that live up inside of the planet that we are not allowed to know about. And that's why Preston James, who's in the military, brings out what we can finally find out when disclosure occurs. Some of the information is going to be made public, some of it isn't. But this is the contemporary access and contact between humanity and the Anunnaki, who have been coming around for 500,000 years. That academia itself. I worked at the Kroeber Library Anthropology Department, UC Berkeley, in the 60s, and they didn't have a clue, not a clue, that there was a worldwide distribution of pyramids and similar icons and similar symbols all over the world, in Kosovo, and it's in China, and it's in...
that's 50 years later.
Yeah. They didn't have a clue about all this because the physical evidence had been suppressed for how long? And how sad that is. There is so much physical evidence, and it's not just on the ground. There's physical evidence in the sky. I don't know if you've ever seen the Orion Nebula photographs. It is in the shape of a brain.
Off what section of the constellation?
Right. And you know who does wonderful work about that is Danny Wilton on YouTube. And he has done some wonderful analyses of the Orion Nebula and how it is situated in the sky to look just like a human brain.
But in what section of the constellation do you find it in reference to the belt of Orion? Where do you find this brain?
Right behind it. It's the pot behind the belt.
So look through the belt, you'll see it.
Yeah, right.
Very telling.
Okay, yeah, and look for Danny Wilton on YouTube.
Danny.
And he has done... Pardon?
What's his name again? I'm trying to pull it up.
Danny Wilton, Wilten.
Okay.
And the significance of the brain behind the belt is?
That is the origin of the Anunnaki race, and that is the origin of the Emerald Covenant Treaty. And the Emerald Covenant Treaty, as I found out last week, is a treaty about only... The Anunnaki are only concerned with races that we would call white, either Aryan or Shemite, or there was one other, and that all the other races, as far as the Anunnaki went, and as far as they go, are just part of the landscape.
Yes.
They're just part of the landscape. That is so shocking to me.
Why?
Because I know people of mixed and black and Asian and all kinds of races who are wonderful. What do you mean they're just part of the landscape?
We're talking about a certain mindset that came here from that planet, and why the white race was so predominant in Europe, that became so powerful over top of an Africa or initially, China we didn't know much about back then, but it came out. All the power came out of the Mediterranean.
And they're the Anu-Nazi and the Ashkenazi. Okay, they're Nazis, and their whole philosophy is that the intellect is what's important. And that's one of the reasons why hierarchy, which is the primary teaching of the Anunnaki, has done so poorly. Hierarchy does not work well in a diverse environment with a lot of different races and a lot of different ways of being. You notice that the Anunnaki have a hierarchy, and that makes perfect sense because they're a single race, just like a beehive is a single race, okay, or a wolf pack is a single race, and they all act the same, and they all behave the same, and they all think the same. That makes perfect sense. But to take the hierarchy and to impose it on a planet where we have people from 1 foot to 10 feet tall, they come in all colors, they come in all IQs, they come in all kinds of social situations. To have a hierarchy there has really hobbled the evolution of humanity completely, has hobbled us in terms of causes and effects. And that was the point I wanted to make today, was that whereas the Anunnaki gave us so much that was civil and good and workable, they gave us agriculture and measurement and engineering and civil law. They gave us a whole bunch of stuff. The one part of the Anunnaki culture that does not work here is hierarchy. And who is the hierarchy? The governments are hierarchies. The academics are hierarchies. The professional associations are hierarchies. The non-governmental organizations and the think tanks are hierarchies. The churches, which supposedly teach the behaviors of Jesus Christ, who was supposed to have been an enlightened being, well, it got hooked back into the hierarchy model. So you have this contradiction in Christianity between the teachings of fairness and the hierarchy again, to undo the teachings of fairness. And so hierarchy was the one gift that the Anunnaki gave us that just didn't fit.
But why is it then today? Is it just cultural? When you see the, I guess she was Miss Universe, I think. She was a black woman from Africa. And her whole life she felt she was so ugly compared to the white women, and now she wins the #1 prize?
Well, there's political correctness coming out of the hierarchy.
Right.
Okay, and that's what that's an example of.
You can so influence the mind of a white woman and a black woman that one is far higher than the other?
Of course. That's what television is for.
I understand that part, but at what point are you able to overwhelm the cells of the body, which keep the truth? Apparently, each cell has the truth of the universe in it. And at what point does that black woman begin to not believe what her body is telling her?
Well, that is the function of spirit. We call it spirit when a person can repudiate all the judgments that are heaped on them, repudiate their environment and say, no, I'm not what you're telling me. I'm not going to be like that. I'm going to be who I am. And that's spirit, and that's really exciting. That's really wonderful.
And so it's really a program of the Anunnaki, you're saying, to have people think this way in a divisive way.
Well, but you see, they didn't intend it to do any harm. All of the other disciplines that they gave us worked out, okay? We got engineering and we got agriculture and we got, a lot of things that worked. But hierarchy in a non-uniform environment just doesn't work.
Right.
And what we who are walking around here in third density, physical 3D, what we are asking for is that we have a say in what happens to us because we're all so different. And that flies in the face of hierarchy. And so the problem we are facing now is the difference in ethics between the hierarchy model and the causes and effects in 3D model of honesty. They're two different ethical models that I talk about. Come, let us make man in our image.
And Enki is the second one. What are you calling that one? You're labeling that
Go
one.
slowly. Can I repeat that, please? Go slowly there.
Where do
the model of hierarchy? Emily, correct me if I'm wrong. The first model is Enlil's model. He has hierarchy, and Enki is the freedom, and then he said it's some kind of cleansing at the end of the road.
Oh no, well under the Emerald Covenant, Enki adopted a model that everybody should do what they wanted, okay, right? He wanted them to have freedom. That's what I've heard Sasha say, and that's what I've read in the accounts. He wanted them to have freedom. But remember, that was freedom under a Anunnaki monarchy. And so it was a freedom in a class system.
Yes.
The monarchy had its privileges, and the rest had their privileges. Okay? And so, that being...
to this... Are you there?
Yes, indeed. I think that I agree with your analysis, Emily. That indeed our makers, Ningishita, Enki, and Nimma, wanted us to do better than them, but it was under this benevolent dictatorship. And what I'm saying, because I can feel it in my bones, and I can say as an anthropologist that Paul Rayton has said a long time ago, is that when people go within and reflect, no matter what their cultural symbols, they're able to transcend their separate feelings and understand how everything works right back to the creator of all, because it is indeed a holographic universe, and you can bet that Enki and Enlil, too, for that matter, have evolved a long way since they've last passed through.
Exactly.
The most important
that's why I don't blame
hierarchy was the hierarchy where men ruled and women didn't, and this is incredibly, first that shuts off, within each class, it shuts off half the intelligence that could be used and the compassion that we really need to be able to deal with the diverse people. So that's hierarchy always sucks, and a kingship is just a form of racism that says some people's lights, because of who their parents are superior to the lights that others have to shine. But the more directions that we look at things from, the greater we can all learn from each other. It's foolishness, it's idiocy to live by hierarchy, and we are no longer need to think of ourselves as inferior beings. We are passionate, empathetic people, and we demand our right to make our own decisions.
Hey, Sugar, I have one question for you. Who is we?
That's me.
The problem is, honey, you're a white man, and you're absolutely aware, and you can go inside and you can make contact. You can do that. You can evolve your spirit. I grew up with people who had no contact with their spirit. And so what we have on this planet, which makes it very difficult, is that we have a mixture of human beings who do have contact with their spirit, and I don't know what the percentage is, but we've got a bunch of people here who are unaware, lazy, simply conforming. They're sheeple, and they don't want to bother with any of the above. So
how does the Jewish race fit in here?
Pardon me?
How does the Jewish evil?
Sheeple, because there's a great quote in an ancient
using
Enoch.
One at a time. Let's
I can't hear either of you because you're both talking.
Okay, one at a time. Let Sasha answer, then we'll go Glenn, then we'll go Emily. Okay, Sasha, and then when you're done, say I'm done.
Okay, it's perfectly apparent to me, having worked as an anthropologist and taught all over, that I can reach ignorant consciousness and involve people's interest so that they eventually reflect and evolve. That's different than evil, where people have decided to be unjust and to snuff other people's consciousness. But I don't underestimate the intelligence and the ability to contribute of people of every class and every race and every condition, frankly.
Okay, and I agree with you completely, but my experience is that most people are not only unaware, they don't care. And so we have a problem with how things are right now. How do we fix a system in which the leaders have been stupefied by ideology into neglect, avoidance, and comfort, and we've got a bunch of working people struggling, getting nowhere? How do we fix this? I don't know. And that is the only part of the Anunnaki culture I see that didn't work out, and I honestly believe that both Enlil and Enki intended well. They each had different methods, and they were trying things out to see what would work. So I don't condemn either of them.
That Enki actually invented the strike when the times were getting bad, Nibiru was coming and everybody was starving, and what Enki said, well, look, in several cases he used this thing, don't give the gods all hold back, boycott, do slow down. In other words, nullity. Stop participating in the institutions that enslave our consciousness.
Well, and that's what we have to do.
Let Glenn have a turn. Okay, Glenn, it's your turn.
I'm hanging in there.
You sure are.
Go ahead.
Let me go to what Emily's saying. Clearly, what Emily's saying is my inquiry in a non-racial way, because I'm a researcher, that when the Jews were, I will say, misled by the God of Moses, that I believe was Enlil, and allowed them, a very intelligent race, allowed themselves to more or less become sheeple. And I think that term is actually used in the book of Enoch, that they were taken up the mountain and misled. So how does that happen, Emily?
They were given behavioral rules to rule themselves. That's not being misled.
Go ahead.
They were given behavioral guidelines to rule and govern themselves instead of being governed by an elite. They were supposed to choose their own elite. They all consented to the judicial principles that they consented to at Exodus 19:8, they said, yes, we will comply with these behavioral guidelines. We will create our own leaders. We will judge ourselves. That was the other model. That was the not hierarchy model, the different model that we are still today trying to put back in place, the governance by consent of the governed, which has been lost in the legal profession.
Again, please, quickly, again that phrase.
We have lost governance by consent of the governed, which was given to the Israelites under Moses because they had behavioral guidelines to follow, and it was just a different model from Enki. I wouldn't say it was worse or better or anything else. It was a different idea.
I have just finished now a long run at the Supreme Court over the constitutional right that Americans cannot be taxed on their wages. And I lost it every round, Emily, all the way up. And I couldn't figure out what was going on in the courts of appeal in America when the Supreme Court ruled in 1916 that American wages cannot be taxed, that corporate dividends was to pay the way for Americans.
Yep.
And only by taxing wages are you able to then expand government to the point that it overtakes everything.
Yep.
But when the American government expanded, it seems to me that forces in Israel today are heavily investing in border control issues, and so that their want is to have more strife and unrest in the world because they make more money under border control, under a fear-based.
Of course, and it's all commercial law. It's the Uniform Commercial Code, which is corporate statutes, just as in 1871 the United States reorganized the United States government as a for-profit corporation in the state, registered in the state of Delaware, and since then we who are born here have a birth certificate with all capital letters on it, which is used as collateral for national debt. The United States government threw itself out in 1871, and we've been working for a corporation ever since.
Wow.
That's why.
Wow.
And this is not known, and it's not taught in school.
It's known by the World Bank whistleblower. I'll think of her name in a second.
Well, there's a handful.
Karen Udis.
Yes,
Karen
very
Udis.
good. Thank you, Sasha. Yes, and so I researched that and said, I'm Canadian. I'm in America for 35 years. How in the hell can this act of 1871 not be taught in schools by independent scholars?
We're run by Masons.
But not the tenured staff of the University of the United States. They're tenured.
Of course. The New York Times, the Washington Post. You know, the Masonic orders go by the doctrines and dogmas of the Anunnaki.
Of 1871, of this watershed year of 1871, when the Constitution of the United States was officially supplanted by this different document.
Yep.
Holy.
And that's true. And that's why common law courts are no longer funded to handle human rights issues, because the courts of the Admiralty, the Roman law courts of the Uniform Commercial Code are profit-making courts, and they carry themselves. They don't have to be carried by taxes. The common law courts have to be funded from taxes, and so jurisdictions have withdrawn the money from common law courts that deal with human rights issues, and they've simply allowed privatized commercial courts of the Admiralty to take over the functions of courts with only their commercial laws, in which there's no such thing as human rights.
May I ask where you learned to speak like this?
I don't know.
Trained as a lawyer.
I haven't even been to law school.
Well, that's my point of my question. I've been to law school. They don't talk like this.
I know that, and that's why we're in such trouble, because they never told us the truth.
But you're crystal clear. I had to go through the muddied waters over the last 2 years, not full time, but a lot of my time, to figure out this whole thing. What happened to the U.S. Constitution? And I am not an American. What happened to the American people who were like wild men at one point? You could not corral these people. They fought a 2-ocean war at somebody else's request.
Yeah. And they were talked into it by this same group that now tells us that we're hopeless and helpless and Ebola is going to get us, and if Ebola doesn't get us, then the Yellowstone is going to blow up, and if that doesn't happen, the drones are going to get us, and if that doesn't happen...
Go back now only to 1717, and my understanding is Francis Bacon, in around 1600, had started the Royal Society of England, because it was the same old crap being taught from Rome in the universities. No new learning was going on. So they formed the Royal Society, and they went through all these great scientists and learnings till they got to Isaac Newton. And Isaac Newton got so close to a certain truth that my understanding is the Hanoverians were brought from Germany, George I, to close down that school and make it all about money. Now, what was Newton so close to? Do you know?
No, I don't. But it's always been because money is hierarchy.
He was an alchemist.
One at a time. Sasha, go ahead. Say you're pointing it back to.
Sasha, go ahead.
Newton, alchemist, and he was in charge of the Chancellor of the Treasury, and he would say he was taking out the extra gold and making monoatomic gold.
Oh. I'm trying to get some of that,
No, the monatomic gold comes from the female. It's produced by the female.
Fine. As soon as I find a female selling it, I want to buy some, okay?
How much money do you have?
Very little. I got 2 nickels to rub together.
Go ahead with your knowledge here about the alchemist and the monatomic gold coming from what source?
I can't remember where I read it right now. I think it might have been Michael. I was having discussions with Michael Tellinger and following up on monoatomic. And
this goes back to Lawrence Gardner.
But I really want to go back about Moses, because if the number one commandment was the commandment of hierarchy, that that you can't recognize any god but me, and right after that Moses had them go out and kill all kinds of people.
I know, that drives me crazy.
They were he had his prophet get Jezebel killed because she preached tolerance and allowed shrines to the other gods, and so I don't really dig on the first commandment for sure.
Okay, I can understand your feeling about that. That makes sense to me, okay? But what we have in the system of laws that Moses gave is really a very good system of common law, which is just causes and effects. If you behave like this, you get a good outcome. If you don't do that, you get a good outcome. And so it's all about the people who do good for people should get a good outcome. And the people who do wrong to people, who harm people, should be disrupted and corrected and put back on the path to do a good outcome. That is the concept, the behavioral concept that Jesus Christ elucidated and articulated in Matthew chapters 5 through 25. Treat people decently and don't worry about dogma. And what the hierarchy does, because I just went through a whole bunch of videos on the Masonic orders, and I was a rainbow girl when I was in high school. And you go to one of their meetings, and they yak it and smack it about all of this, who said what to whom, and what happened then, and then what happened, and what does this mean, and this is a symbol, and that is a this and that. And I said to myself, of what possible use is this? And that's what the Masonic orders do. They lay on the doctrine and the dogma. The problem with the Christian church is that it took the teachings of Jesus and combined it with the hierarchy. And so you've got the hierarchy doing its thing with doctrine and dogma and pontificating, and you've got the people who are at the lower level trying to follow the behavioral precepts of Jesus, frankly, just because they work work out. They work fine. If you treat people well, guess what happens? They treat you okay. So with the church being attacked from 150 sides right now, I can't blame anybody, because the teachings of Jesus got mixed up with the teachings of hierarchy, and what they've got is a quagmire.
But let's go back, Emily, if we can go back to the Newton's what Sasha said about the monatomic gold being produced, because it seems to me between Jesus and Mary Magdalene is the one that knew about the anointing, and she knew about the monoatomic gold.
Okay. So how does that affect history?
This is the war when we get to the point when human beings like Newton can get so close to the truth, according to Sasha, and I agree with him, that something Newton was doing in alchemy, the real alchemy, was really a threat to the Anunnaki gods, that the women of the earth can produce this substance. That's my research, that the females of this race can produce this substance. It's not done in a lab. It's not done the way Lawrence Gardner said it was done, and it's not the way it's alleged that Moses was doing it with some white powder somewhere on Mount Sinai. This is produced...
Cool, give me the recipe.
Well, let me see if I understand what Glenn's saying. Are you saying that Jesus was a result of physical lovemaking, and that was her Amrita? That's what I suspect that you're saying, and that's where it comes from.
My theory so far is that Jesus and Enki, the original NK astronaut, are the same person. He swims up the River Jordan in order to marry the Magdalene at Cana. Magdalene is Ninmah. That wedding is forbidden on their planet because Ninmah had the child out of wedlock with Enlil, and now Enki's thumbing his nose at his father Anu, saying, "I'm Lord of this earth, and I'm going to marry the one I've loved my whole life since childhood." He does that at Cana, but during that ceremony, the Magdalene, who's the one who knows all, she delivers the anointing to the human race. It's that anointing of the female on top that produced the Amrita, and that is what was crushed by the Catholic Church when it was developed in 325 A.D. and then refound by the Knights Templar in 1107.
And they've kept the Virgin Mary, and they've kept some nuns as saints and stuff. But you're right; they got rid of the power of the matriarchy. Only
to stop women from experimenting with themselves. That's the Virgin Mary image. It has nothing to do with Ninmah. Nothing to do with what Ninmah was teaching. It's to stop women from proceeding with their own knowledge of what their bodies can actually do. Women are only using about 10% of their capacity, even today.
Yeah, I know that. I had two mothers, and they were both absolutely unaware, very shallow, very physical people, and they weren't even a shadow of what they might have been if they'd ever opened their eyes and listened to their ears. I understand what you're saying. I agree with you completely. And so that's where we have a problem, because people aren't attentive and they're not vigilant the way women in the matriarchy were brought up to be. And people they would rather have ease, and they would rather have enjoyment and laughter and get off on this, that, and the other interest because they prefer their own preferences. And as a result, society's in a mess.
But it's the Amrita from the female during heightened sexual arousal that produces the quantum experience and an advance in intellectual capacity.
Well, that's nice, but how about people just caring, Today we have a problem getting people to even care, let alone to go within and connect with their higher being. Getting them to care in the first place is the big problem.
Well, as long as you have men dominating the scene and their agenda dominating what goes on the planet, you have us killing the children of women.
That's right.
Men don't
and the domination comes from the hierarchy system. That's why I speak against hierarchy. It's the one gift the Anunnaki gave us that didn't work out.
And we need partnership. Synergy and
cooperation. Right. And there are some religions that never adopted hierarchy. The Essenes were one, and the Quakers have not, and 12 tribes, and Mennonites, and
what about the fathers of the United States? Benjamin Franklin, Thomas Jefferson. What about those people?
Well, they were Masonic, so they were on both sides of the fence. That's why they were so bright.
Go ahead, explain.
Well, George Washington was a renowned Mason, and I got to go to Mount Vernon where he lived when I lived in Virginia, and there is a congregation there of half black people who all look very much like him, and he may have been a Christian who went to services on Sunday, but he was busy hybridizing his slaves, having children with the black women on his plantation, to the effect that the congregation that is in Mount Vernon right now all look very much like George Washington, and they're
why is he doing that? Why the black woman?
I have no idea. I have no. Well,
the Islamic agenda is white women, Aryan race, purity.
Well, maybe he was just trying to improve their performance. As a manager would try to improve the performance of his employees, he just generates his own employees. I don't know.
Washington was really part, and Alexander Hamilton might have been his illegitimate son, but Hamilton's plan was to make sure the United States was in debt so it could be part of the international banking-controlled world. And so you have to really look. Washington and Hamilton, as I have, and I say they're part of this same network that we've been talking about.
Yeah.
Great point, Sasha. Sasha, are you aware that Benjamin Franklin went to the eastern side of France? In the times that he was in Paris, he would specifically visit the eastern regions, the Languedoc and that area of France?
There are stories that he had... participating in all kinds of terrible rituals, including the murder of children, which were underneath the place that he had in France. And so he's a delightful old man in our mythology, but the reality might be a hell of a lot darker than you know.
Well, Satanism is taking out people who don't belong here. That's the whole ideology of Satanism. Get rid of the ones who are going to get the rest of us in trouble before they get us in trouble. And non-conforming unwanted children, unwanted babies, and teenagers who speak the wrong questions, and old folks who say too much. I mean, those are all the people that have to be gotten rid of if you're going to have a society that in which the hierarchy doesn't have much resistance.
Now, what's Enki's philosophy in all of this, Emily?
I really don't know nearly as much about Enki as Sasha and Janet do. I'm a thread of Enlil.
When Enki had his son Adapa, he was delighted. They couldn't believe how smart, how precocious we were, and that's when the geneticists said, you know what? They're going to do better than we did. There's something special. Little Titi went up to when Enlil came over and saw that she was she'd made an apron and a little table and stuff like that. And he started talking about her, and she said, "Hey, I'm Titi. Look what I made." She wasn't afraid of him at all. And so these are smart. Very, very, very smart. That's us. These are our ancestors. This is the special line that Enki bred to rule, and through Noah, that's who started the line that everybody wants to get into.
Yeah, and some of us are stuck in it.
But I'm personally of the line of Enlil, as Emily is. But why does Enki's message resonate then, Sasha, with us?
Well, one thing to think about is that Anu is the common father of both of them. and he does seem to ultimately, as did almost all the kings of Nibiru, surrender to the Prime Creator and say, and what he has said in his 3840 visit to Earth is, it's obvious that the Creator of all has asked us to secure this race, to nurture it, and and Earth shall be for them, and they shall make of it something fine. And you, Aningashita, and you, Enki, will be their special guides.
And that's I've decided to believe Anu's intention, and to believe that both Enki and Enlil, they had different methods. They were trying it out. They didn't know what was going to work. They muddled through it, and yes, Enlil was an asshole, all right. But they worked at getting this planet going. And so I don't have any anger about who did what to whom, or who said what to whom, or who had babies with whom, or any of that, who said what or who did what. They were struggling 450,000 years ago, 208,000 years ago. We're still struggling, and we're still struggling with the same conflict between hierarchy versus self-governance and self-development and self-awareness.
But also, there's also the triangle of love. The love affair.
It's really ironic in a way. One of the basic rules of hierarchy at the Anunnaki was that you never contradicted your father. And so even if Enlil didn't like what Anu was saying, he had to go along with it. And he did go along with it wholeheartedly when Anu said, listen, I want you to forgive your half-brother Marduk and reinstate him. Enlil's first act was, okay, you can actually start, you can move to Eridu and build your place in Babil, and that's okay. And so that's it's always obeying your father is good. Of course, Nergal didn't. He was a turncoat. But on the other hand, always obeying is the problem.
That's right.
Enki, if I'm right, Enki at wedding at Cana, Sasha, some just knows his father because of emotions overwhelmed him for his love of his life, Ninmah, and he marries Ninmah, the Black Madonna, who's forbidden by her father to marry. He marries her at Cana.
That's right. They followed their hearts, and that's of course the same message of Jesus. The head isn't supreme; let the heart be supreme.
Right, and the hierarchy follows the head, and the self-governance has to follow the heart. The sense of justice about what's right in terms of relationships, and we're still in.
Okay, so listen, I'm gonna. This is going to be a little bit heavy for this class, but this is okay. There's no such thing as a unified bureaucracy within a cephalous society, a king-ruled society. There's always going to be a competition for what the policy will be about everything, and that competition. And that's politics. And so it's impossible to ever have a unified anything. So you might as well just build in a synergistic interaction to influence decision rather than a destructive one. That's what I think.
Yes, completely correct. And I've seen that work in a method by Dr. John N. Warfield, Professor Emeritus of the University of Virginia, and he has the method. He was an engineer philosopher and devised a method for debriefing a group of 20 to 40 people who didn't know or trust each other about an issue they had no interest in whatsoever. And he would get that group going through a process, and at the end of a weekend or a series of meetings, they would agree on what happened. It was the most amazing thing I ever saw. So I know, because I did that same process for 5 years at George Mason University in undergraduate classes, I know that there is a system to debrief people at all ends of a problem. You know, when you have a problem that's bigger than the people who are dealing with it, there is a way to get the truth out of a group of people so that they can actually come together on a consensus and see where the problem is and go for it. So I know it's true. It's like knowing God personally. When you know something can be done, you keep asking yourself, well, why aren't we doing that? Why aren't we doing that?
Absolutely. I was trained in the method, Carl Rogers' method of how you get people with the most disparate positions to care about each other as human beings. Then they can work out anything. And they actually started experimenting with this on some African countries that had border disputes, and they got people from the ministries to be in these encounter groups, and they would come back with alternating sovereignty over areas and all kinds of innovative things. And what happened is that the people that wanted to keep the stress and the separation and the issues unresolved so they could maintain control basically pulled the financing for these experiments, which proved beyond a shadow of a doubt, just like Emily said, we have the methodology. It was employed to a certain degree in the Camp David Accords when the three grandfathers cried together and said, we're going to go back and our children are going to war forever. And so Begin and Carter and Sadat said, they'll probably kill me for this, but I'm going to do it. And
Glenn, if you studied with Carl Rogers, you're the same generation I am.
Sasha.
Because I did too.
Sasha. That was Sasha speaking, not Glenn.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was Sasha. But Glenn, you haven't said anything for a while. Do you have something to interject?
No, I'm totally fascinated by the whole retake of the American Founding Fathers and this process I've gone through with the American Constitution, and still I'm a little bit bewildered where this constitutional document came from, because it is the most advanced document in world history.
And I don't know. Could we take just a little bit of a break? It's the top of the hour. So I can run. So,
Glenn, are you going to leave us at that time, or do you want to stick with us a little bit longer?
I'll have to go, but I'll be back next week.
Okay, we'll
I've got to research what Emily has said, which is terrific knowledge, and Sasha, and figure out if they're correct, and I'm not saying that they're not, if they're correct, where did this document come from? So I'll do that and get back to you.
Okay, I'll be back in just a few minutes.
Thanks,
okay,
guys.
We're going to take, and Glenn, we'll see you at the same time next week, okay?
We're going to hear Planet now by Jay Earthchild.
All right, we'll see you next week, Glenn. Thanks for joining us today.
Planet of peace. Are they wise as well as strong, or boys in imitation, pointing that he's God, threatening the future, endangering us all? The people of all nations are united to end all war, for we are one human family, sharing one home. Planet of peace, planet of
Sweet. That's sweet.
Thank you. Aloha, and welcome back to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com, and we continue with the second hour of We the Anunnaki with Janet Kara Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson and Emily Winter Cragg. So, yeah, that was
fun.
Earthchild, our dear friend who's now living in Tasmania, Australia, with her husband. So, where do we want to go this second hour? Let's all check in. Sasha, what would you like to say? And then we'll go.
Okay, well, this is an interesting thing, Emily. Imagine that you and I are testifying before a disclosure committee of the Congress of the United States, and we're going to give them an overview of what we've learned about the extraterrestrial contacts through time into the present, and also about how the world has been operating in the hands of the covert government. If we're really, that is, we're advocating, these are the things that seem to be coming through from what we've read, that disclosure will probably give you. This is our conclusions. What would you say to this committee, Emily?
Okay, my conclusion is the ETs are still affecting not only national but international relations and global societies. They are influencing treaties that the people have no opportunity to consent to. There are all kinds of covert activities going on behind closed doors and under tables and behind curtains that we have no opportunity to know about, and accessing what our government is doing because of confidentiality and compartmentalization and need to know and classified documents is very, very difficult, and so for the human on the planet right now, it is almost impossible to plan. The mainstream media is a publicity arm for the agenda of certain elites that run the banks and make money off war. It's very hard to know whom to believe right now. It's hard to know what to believe right now. And so we're thrown back on our spirits. We're thrown back. We have to go inside and figure out what's going on. Now, I have found help in the books that are classified as religious books. And there isn't just one book, okay? There's not just the Bible, the Book of Enoch, the Urantia book, the writings of Emmanuel, Swedenborgen, the Oahspe. There are a whole bunch of, there are at least half a dozen books that have the name of the Anunnaki god Yahweh on them. Now, they don't agree with each other, those books. But the one thing that they point out is after hierarchy versus self-governance deal with each other for a while, they get into intractable conflicts. And this happens over and over and over again. And then somebody has to sort out these intractable conflicts. And I believe that the ETs, the Anunnaki specifically, are going to intervene somehow to sort out the mess we have now. That's my take on it. They're still our progenitors, and they're still interested in us, and they still exist, and they're still here, and they're in treaties, and they're dealing through the tall whites with our government. That's my take on it.
Terrific.
What do you think, Sasha? What do you think,
Janet? Janet, what's your experience? And putting the whole thing together, what are your most general conclusions about should we, once there is disclosure, what would we find out, and what do you suggest we do about it?
Well, I think that there already is disclosure in the form of the contactees, that there was some attempt to bring the truth to the surface through our presidents, and that got hijacked by, I guess the military elite who just didn't want it to come forth because it would undermine the economy. And but anyway, I just see from a whole different perspective. I had a major download last night, and I'm kind of still almost like in a altered state of consciousness, having been in contact with this higher dimensions and this information that was quite profound. But I think that we are getting more and more contact every day, some of it, by visitations to individuals, and some of it by mass sightings. If you look on YouTube at the UFO sightings of 2014, they are profoundly different than previous years. More of these sightings are up close. The UFOs are coming down, whether they're human or extraterrestrial, I'm not sure. Even if they're CGI, it doesn't matter. The type of videos out there are showing all these craft that seem to defy, traditional planes and ships that are out there, and they could be reverse engineered, but it doesn't matter. It's just showing that there's something accelerating here. 2014, we've just gone through these major leaps and bounds, so I can see that in the very near future, something's going to happen. And this goes back to this article that Emily gave me today, which I didn't get to read all the way, by Preston James, which basically I would like to talk about this next hour. And since Emily's had a chance to read and digest it, she might be able to summarize it for us. But I'm getting to the title. Hold on, I got to scroll up. Secret Space War, 18, completely verbatim, verboten. No, it's B-E-R-B-O-T-E-n.
Verboten is forbidden in German.
What's that mean?
Forbidden.
Forbidden is saying German. Verboten, so it's using the German. And I've seen a part of this before. It shows the one shuttle mission where there was clearly recorded a ship in space, and then it stopped dead, and it turned the other way, and then a beam came up from somewhere, the Earth or something, so there's these hints of the space wars that are going on, and the Third Reich, and the Vril, and the Vril girls that had the long hair, and that was part of their power. Anyway, there's all this information that's coming out, and I'd like to talk about that. But first of all, before we get to that phase, Dr. Lisson, with all your research, what are your conclusions? What's going to happen?
Yes, ladies and gentlemen of this joint session of the Congress of the United States on disclosure, I'm delighted that you've asked me to speak before you. I know that when we do get disclosure, the evidence is overwhelming that there's been a series of extraterrestrial visits from even before the Anunnaki, who are our creators, got here on this planet. But the disclosure is obviously going to if we have some kind of truth and reconciliation and we can enforce it, we will have knowledge of the secret treaties, the secret bases, everything that the wars that have been perpetrated on humanity, and we're talking about we're going to have to let people survive who have basically caused genocide, false flag events like 9/11 as an excuse to cut out whatever civil liberties were left, and the assassination of President Kennedy, and on and on and on. That most of the things that people go, oh, what should we do? And Congress said, oh, well, what should we do? Oh, let's do this and do this quick. In other words, we fall right into the reaction that the Illuminati has again and again created for us to fight each other while they come out on top. Oh, all this is going to come out, and people have blood on their hands. Mr. Cheney, Mr. Rumsford, the Bushes, they have murdered millions, and we are going to have to let them off the hook if they'll just get out of power and let you people of Congress, you're supposed to represent us. Well, do it. We've had enough of enslavement. We've had enough of injustice. It's time to turn a new page. We demand total disclosure.
Wow, passionate Sasha.
Well, and Sasha, you are helping with the total disclosure because you've taken Sitchin's very awkward writing, and you've made it very readable. And because you've made it very readable, you've made it easier for me, because I've put together a couple of books about this too, to understand the ins and outs of the conflict between Enlil and Enki. So you're one of those people making this disclosure possible, and I want to thank you for that.
Thank you so much.
So, Emily, do you want to go over this article a little bit and tell us what, could you summarize it for us?
Oh, okay, the summary is this. The Anunnaki have been in touch with the Norwegians and Germans the whole time since the 20s, and they still are. And through the tall whites, they're affecting the Swiss banks, which are affecting the Rothschilds, which are affecting everything in the banking system. So I'm just praying for this new banking system called BRICS to unhinge and undo the Rothschilds' 500 trillion domination of finance on the planet. I read Benjamin Fulford quite a bit, and he has a very different point of view about how things are coming together out of the milieu and the domain of the cabal, the banking cabal that has an iron grip on the economies and causing the wars, because that's how they make their money, is on war. And all of this has been written about 1,000 years ago in the Book of Revelation. Okay, the Book of Revelation talks about the seven churches and the different revelations of the different sects, the different sectarian denominations. Okay, and it talks about how the beast that hover over the whole world with their systems are strangling the people, and how the people who try to live decently are being beheaded literally, and how it's going to work out. And what the Book of Revelation says is that it's all going to come out in the wash. We're all going to get there.
Revelations, were they predicting the future? Are they time traveling?
Yeah.
Were they
in the book?
Are they going back in time to create? Are they actually creating what they prophesied? So you're saying it's time travel?
That's a good question. But what Jesus said was, as the days of the Son of Man. The days of the Son of Man will be like the days of Noah, that people will be marrying and being given in marriage, and they will take no note, and they will only be doing what they always do, And then everything is going to collapse on the system, and presumably individuals whose auras, I think we are identified by the Anunnaki and the higher beings, by the colors of our aura. I think that's how they see us and interpret who we are and what we are.
Yes, and what is the mark of the beast? Is that some kind of identification system?
That's a very good question.
There is a way that they know by our soul signature, but you're saying it might be an auric symbol.
Oh, well, the auric symbol is the way that an angel can identify a person of a certain ideology. But the mark of the beast has not yet been determined. There are people who say that it's the RFID chip. There are people who say it's your social security number. There are people who, people have different beliefs about what it is. I don't think we're going to know what it is till the whole thing's over. And then we'll say,
from what I understand is we're already getting shots, and the implant is so tiny. Every time a needle pierces your skin, at any given time, just getting a shot for a vaccination or your shots at birth or your shots to go to school, that is part of the chip that can go in. It's not a large item. It's microscopic. You can go in
and that could be true. On the other hand, if you look at scriptural exegesis from the perspective of a Christian, you could say that the mark of the beast on someone's forehead is what they're thinking about, and what's on their hand is what they're doing. So it could just be their ideology, but I don't know what the mark of the beast is, because it could be a lot of different things now. And what we're going to notice is when the whole tipping point is over, we're going to look at who left and who stayed. And we're going to look at, what were the characteristics of the ones who left, and what are the characteristics of those who are left behind. Now, the ones who leave really have an easier time of it, because they simply carry on at the soul spirit level, at whatever level they are. The ones who are left here and have to deal with survival will be challenged to the max for a while, as Noah had to be challenged after he left the boat and had to start over again. Starting over again is not an easy thing to do. I don't know if you started from scratch lately, but it's hard. So,
it's hard,
living through this is going to be a challenge and not an indulgence. And that's okay, because we learn, we are blessed by our challenges that we meet and exceed. That's called a success. That's called an attainment, And so if we're left behind and we have to meet the challenge of survival, that says that God believes that we are competent to move on. If we don't, then we're just going to go hang out with the angels and play our harps and screw around. But I think it's all going to come out in the wash. Religion or no religion?
This ascension process, is that what you're talking about? What are you talking about? Going and staying and leaving behind and starting over. Who's going, who's staying, who's leaving behind? Are we shifting dimensions?
Fortunately, that's not my job, and I don't know who's going to go, and I don't know who's going to stay, and I don't know by what process.
But what they're referring to, what they call the ascension process. Is that what?
There's the ascension process. There's the death in Sheol process. There's the death in Gehenna process. There are different ways that people die, that different ways that people terminate their experience in the material body.
So explain that to us, please, what you just said.
All right. Well, in Gehenna, there's nothing to be remembered because the soul is destroyed. In Sheol, the soul goes to sleep until that soul reincarnates sometime in the future. In ascension, it's also called salvation. The person who leaves here leaves with their identity and their memories, and they simply continue. They just simply walk out of one incarnation into a higher incarnation, and there's no lapse of time.
So how does the soul get killed?
How does a soul get dispersed? One of the things that I heard about that was in the nursing home, when a very bright elder is treated as if they are stupid over and over and over and over and over again, the soul itself commits suicide and shuts down because they just give up. Okay,
Sasha, what would you like Yeah, okay. Are you complete with that? I was just going to pass the ball to Sasha, see what the sections are.
Just from my perspective, it's a holographic universe, and everything that is anywhere in it is there to some resonant degree within you, just as you are within every being and molecule of the universe, right up to the source, to the prime creator. And so they may not be sequential, or the sequential may just be a function of the intellectual brain. They may be simultaneous, and they may even be jumbled around in some kind of a quantum way that's different than the way we're used to thinking in a cause and effect.
Yes, and all of the above, because so many times are simultaneous, and thoughts are simultaneous, and I'm not at a level to have sorted all of that out yet, so I just say to myself, well, it's all got to come out in the wash.
Good way of doing it. You had things that you wanted to cover on this show, and we have like 33 minutes left. What would you like to?
All right.
Would you like to
well, we talked about hierarchy a little bit, but I really wanted to look at different disciplines and how they have been affected by hierarchy in very negative ways. For instance, in academia, you have these peer review professional organizations that condemn anybody who questions anything. And so the sciences in that way have been compromised. For instance, let me give you an example. The scientific dogma of self-generating evolution, is funded and funded and funded and funded, and we see articles on the net all the time about, well, we've seen microbes coming from asteroids, and that proves that there was life in the universe at some time or some place in the past. Oh, come on, they're messing with us. They're messing with us. There's no such thing as self-generating life. You can park a car in the garage for 10,000 years, and it's never going to take off on its own. Okay, there's no such thing. The Christian church has done the same damn thing. They have taken the dogma of creation in 6 days, and honest to God, I go to a wonderful little church just because it makes me feel better, all right? And two of the ladies in that church looked at me with these innocent eyes and said, You mean the universe isn't 6,000 years old? And I didn't know whether to laugh or cry because they actually believe that horse stuff. Okay, so that hierarchy has taken the Bible and made an idol out of it and put its literal things up on pedestals and made them idols for people to worship, which is just exactly what scientific does when it says that life just arises on its own. Okay, so then I look at anthropology, and when I worked at the Kroeber Library at University of California, and I was editing doctoral dissertations, and I did that for 7 years, so I guess I did about 21 doctoral dissertations. And some of them were pretty interesting. But what I noticed was they all held to the line. There was no civilization they talked about that was older than 6,000 years old, just as if they were fundamentalist Bible Belt Christians. And at the time I laughed. I thought it was funny then. And it's still not funny, okay? And then there's allopathic medicine, which in its hierarchy has decided that visits, tests, procedures are the end-all and the be-all of the healing arts. It doesn't matter what the actual iatrogenic effects of prescriptions are, which is just a staggering loss of life due to bad reactions to allopathic drugs. But the allopathic hierarchy has bought into this doctrine and dogma with the tenacity of of a Caesar. It's like, whoa. Okay. So then we look at geology, okay? And geology has decided that the Earth has a molten core and it's solid, although I don't know any way that a solid bullet could ever orbit a gas bag, which is what they claim that the sun is. Okay, and so they're still talking about the molten iron core of the Earth when we know that's impossible. Okay, so let's go to astronomy. And in astronomy, they study NASA photographs that have been altered and messed with at Pine Gap, Australia, on the necessity of NRO, NSA, NASA policies that prohibit disclosure. Now, I used to work for Xerox, and what I had to do at Xerox was make my customers' copies true to the original imprint. And so that's what I do with NASA and astronomy and webcam photos, is make them true to the original imprint. And I'll tell you right now that the text that accompanies a NASA photo, any NASA photo, has nothing to do with what's in the picture. Nothing. Okay. Because NASA has bought into the dogma and the doctrine of non-disclosure. They are there to make sure that we never get to see what else is there besides what their camera lens was focused on, which is usually nothing. It's focused 90 feet in front of the camera, and then it's only 72 pixels per inch, and then sometimes they paint over it, and sometimes they color it wrong, and sometimes they misscale it. I have fun figuring that out. So far I've talked about problems in astronomy, geology, anthropology, and medicine. Then we get to law. Okay? And so here we are at a place and a time when social knowledge has reached its nadir. There is almost nothing that we have access to in a textbook or on a news program that's true, literally. And we have a hell of a time gleaning through sources that are trying to make noise saying, well, I have an idea. Here, let's look at this over here. So we're living in a time when disinformation and misinformation is totally dominating us. And that's why, Sasha, the ability to bring groups to consensus about what's real and true in a problem that they're actually experiencing, like the Carl Rogers model, is so important to us right now. And it needs to be exercised right now, but there is no funding to do it because the powers that be want us all stupid. And so that's...
I love your analysis. I agree 100% with every single thing you said so far. It could be me talking. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So the button I want to be pushing, that we can push from here, you and the three of us can push with your friends, because we're all trying to get to the truth, is how do we unpack our experience together so we can figure out what to do?
I can say that one suggestion for anyone listening to this program is to regard your intellect as a valuable contributor to you, the whole person, and for you to open up your vulnerability and your empathetic parts that you have to often conceal or protect so they won't be hurt, and that you can open up that heart, that empathy to other people that you think are, especially people that you have difficulty with, and to see if you can see what do those people really need, and empathize with them. That doesn't mean kill your intellect, but it means that now you can make your decisions with an empathetic, feelingful aspect, as well as a clear and logical aspect.
And I want to take it just a step further. We all live somewhere, okay, and we live around other people. And what we can do is join with others and solve problems with others with an open heart. And sometimes those people that you can join with belong to your ideology or your culture or your bloodline or your whatever, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're different. They could be your bowling league. They could be your Boy Scout troop. They could be the church you're going to that's not the right denomination, but these people are nice. I think I'll get along with them. Or they could be your kids who've returned home because they can't make it, your kids' friends, and you get together in a consensus and say, you know, we want to live longer. We want to make it. We want to solve problems together and think together, how can we do this? And that's what I'm hoping that our little talks are going to lead to, is that people are going to come together and learn how to trust each other and solve problems for themselves and leave the government to just kind of the house of cards to fall.
Yes, stop participating in the war machine, in the debt machine.
Yes, that's my hope that we can accomplish from here.
Janet, what do
now,
you
I
think?
can't get together with you because you guys are in Hawaii, and that's a little bit of a commute from here. Okay, but I have this little church, okay, and they're not my denomination, but they're wonderful, trusting, open and honest people, and they honestly don't have a problem with how weird I am, you know? And that's really cool for me. Well,
you know, it doesn't matter what symbols a person uses or how they express themselves. You know, like my my second wife's mother, the most she could ever say it was, "Jesus loves you," and I knew that what she meant is that she loved me, but she couldn't say something like that.
Yeah, okay, yes, right. And so where I am is in a Bible-thumping fundamentalist church where I just mostly keep my mouth shut and get along, and it's working. And now I'm starting to tell the stories to the children in the children's hour and participating in the potlucks. And we're going to, you know, and growing the relationships, because it's by the relationships we're going to get through this.
Yes.
Right.
So that's where I was going with this.
But you were what?
That's where I was going with this, that we need to pull ourselves together with other people who are aware, and in the process, we may have to allow people who are part of our family, where we work or wherever, who are unaware, we may have to just let them go. We may have to say to ourselves,
going to evolve to a new reality for our planet before we self-destruct?
Yeah.
In your opinion.
What was that, the whole question?
How will this personal one-on-one contact evolve to the global level in time for us we won't self-destruct? And
Well,
there's something about this disclosure that's happening that's going to do something here.
I don't think that disclosure by the government is going to do a damn thing.
Yeah,
I don't think disclosure is going to make any difference at all. I think what's going to make the difference between whether people leave or whether they stay in order to start over with the challenge of surviving in a new way, that is not going to be the government. That the government's not going to have anything to do with that. I think the government's about to fall.
About that you're saying that there is going to be some type of disclosure while other parts are going to be held secret. I didn't get to read the article, but they are going to see. They had decided that actual verified disclosure of the presence of alien ETs in their anti-gravity craft will be allowed and will be systematically rolled out in an orderly fashion.
The only effect that has is to tell people that we've been lied to all along and to get loose and get free from the government. That's the only effect it has, is to just get out of here.
So that happens. get loose and free from the government, then what? Where's that going to lead us?
Well, it leads us inside.
They've thought it 10 steps down the line, 20 steps down the line. They've thought it through. And we're only getting it pieced out to us a little bit at a time. Like here is an article on what was that, news, I don't have it. I don't know where it came from. But anyway, so this is being doled out to us for some ultimate agenda and some outcome that the powers that be know in advance. Just like you said in the Bible, we have Revelations. Revelations was a program, a plan of what they intended to unfold. And I kind of read it 30, 40, 50 years ago and didn't like it, so I didn't stick with it because I don't know, I just didn't like it. But this is something that we've wrapped our heads around, and so we have all these little stories, like the fundamentalists. Oh, that's the rapture, and it was an excuse to feel superior. Well, they're only going to take us true believers and leave you behind, and all these interpretations of Revelations, one book in the Bible, which is so convoluted, who knows what they're saying, but you're saying that was actually some kind of prediction of the outcome. Did they see this? Did they travel
and at the end of Revelation in chapter 21, everything has been worked out, and God is with his people, and there are no tears anymore, there's no outcry, there's no pain anymore, the former things have passed away, and mankind is at peace. That's the outcome of Revelation.
Billions of people get murdered on behalf of this so-called peace. I don't back the whole thing.
That's what I went back to when I said that hierarchy has preempted and co-opted the church, the official behavioral teachings of Jesus. Hierarchy has co-opted it and used it for its own purposes. And that's why all these people have been taken out by hierarchy, but not by the people who actually practice the behaviors of Jesus. They're the ones who always get taken out. They always get taken out. And God knows, I guess they're always in heaven, I guess. That's the outcome.
You're saying they're actually being selectively murdered. Killed.
Yeah, they're removed in order to be put somewhere else because they don't fit into wherever they are. That is what it looks like to me because, the simple fact is we all die. Nobody gets out of here in an intact meat suit. Nobody.
At
ever.
This point, we are told that, but there's indicators that that's not 100% true.
99.99999.
That are outside of that system, and they just sit back generation after generation, watching humanity being murdered repeatedly, generation after generation, because there are cures for these diseases, and cures for the disease of aging, and so 100,000 plus a year are murdered that could otherwise live and have a choice whether they die or not, but they're being taken out by diseases. Including
they're being taken out, period, by whatever, and the outcome is that they no longer get any human material experience, which is a loss to them. But the ones who ascend, the ones who follow the doctrines of ascension, are only the Anunnaki personally themselves. Because nobody else has even the capacity.
What that statement means. You're saying the Anunnaki are ascending, and they're the only ones that are ascending?
Yeah, they're the only ones who can. They're the only ones who have the DNA capacity to just keep going on their own. The rest of us have DNA
capacity, or is it part of the 256 genomes that have been shut off, that if they would just turn it back on, we too would have the capacity.
But we don't have the capacity to just turn it on because it was turned off in the hybridization process. So the only way it could be turned on for us is if one of the Anunnaki were to point us out and say, turn that lady's DNA back on.
So it could be. It could be
conceivably possible, but I'll bet you it's very rare. I'll bet you it's very
I'm not saying whether it happens or not. I'm saying it's possible, and then who's in control of turning on and not turning on?
I would suggest
who's the original
experiment.
coder?
Imagine that there's a very, very small U that enters your nostril and gets even smaller and goes between the cells and actually goes to your core DNA. And as you go there, imagine you're touching the DNA and the mitochondrial DNA, and you're giving it spiritual energy, and you can feel it getting warm, and you can feel an interchange going, and you're activating it, and you're giving it your light, your energy, saying, I'm ready for more. I'm ready to learn more. I'm ready to do and be and feel more. And
now, that's a wonderful visualization, and that's the way the Anunnaki's minds work, by visualizing what they want to manifest, okay? But to what extent the manifestation of a visualization works down here in third density is one of the questions I want to bring up. Because down here, which is damn close to hell, by the way, because here we are in time and we're stuck in a location, we're stuck in a place, we're stuck in a function, okay? Very little happens unless we utilize the laws of physical cause and effect. And one of the things I wanted to get into tonight that I really don't have time to do is the different ethics between fifth-dimensional manifestation versus third-dimensional causes and effects. And I sense from you, Sasha, you're completely embedded in the fifth-dimensional visualization of manifestation process. And that's understandable. But there's another process we have to deal with down here. Somebody has to take out the garbage, and somebody has to plow the ground. And somebody has to actually do things to make things happen. And when something is done, it is either judged to be sociotropic or so antisocial, okay? And so those judgments and those actions and those acts, those behaviors, have moment here in 3D that don't matter in 5D because they don't have causes and effects in time. They're in a timeless dimension where what you visualize is what appears in front of you like a holodeck. So it's a different method of thinking that the Anunnaki brought here and gave to the elites to manifest their outcomes and their lives, different from the slave population who the ones who are only familiar with and aware of their own thoughts and not aware of any telepathic input whatsoever, like the family I grew up with. Okay, they have to do things differently in terms of causes and effects than you do them in terms of visualizing a manifestation. And that's where our leadership has gotten in real trouble. It's not just the hierarchy.
You on level you chose or you somehow ended up in with this family because that showed you what to rebel against. So you went in another direction, and so it was perfect in the divine plan. I think that this 3D existence that we have is, as human beings, is the grand experiment. Can human beings learn how to do, as you're simulating it, the fifth dimensional manifestation type cause or system here in this cause and effect reality? And
we have to do them both. We have to know when we're doing one and when we're doing the other. And when we have a cause and effect problem, it doesn't work to do a wishing, visualizing manifestation. And when we have a wishing, manifesting problem, it doesn't work to go dig up some dirt in the garden. We have to know when we're using which method. And that's the joy.
right now, though.
Yeah, I understand what Emily's saying, and it really makes sense to honor every level of you and every one of your sub-personalities, your infantile and your spiritual sub-selves, and to be able to coordinate and synthesize your behaviors. When you transcend, for example, when you're a body mind and you're an intellect, and you think you're like a truck driver driving around this body, and then you integrate your mind in your body and you become a whole person. That doesn't mean that you don't have a body, you don't have a mind. It's just subsumed under something else. You have 7 chakras, and when you subsume all your energies under your heart chakra, that doesn't mean that you don't have sexual energies or survival energies or oratory energies or anything of the sort. It just means that they're subsumed and integrated. And there's always
not integrated. You have to be able to differentiate, is what I'm saying. Diversity demands differentiation, and not just trying to put everything into your visualized manifest whole. Sometimes you got to take out the garbage. You got to be physical. And you have to be with being physical.
Where if you are an aware ego or center, you can see what degree of physicality, emotionality, and joy and song you want to give to a given situation.
There you go. And our problem is our children have been taught that distractions are more important than being able to discern the difference between inner knowledge and external knowledge. Our children have been taught that gaming is more important than sincerity, and that what's politically correct and conformity is more important than knowing when to stand for a principle or a truth. Our children are very, very confused right now. And my kids are in their 30s to 50s, and let me tell you, they're confused. I can see it just because of the materialism and the rat races that they have adopted, that they can't differentiate between manifesting out of their own generosity versus solving a physical problem in the present. And that's why my life has brought me to the point where I have to see these differences. And also, in the difference between Enki's manner of teaching and what came out of Enki's teaching, which has a lot to do with secrecy, versus Enlil's teaching everybody certain behaviors that in themselves became iconic and idolatrous. The behaviors became more important than the emotions or relationships. Okay, we're back to the back and forth between rules versus spirit, and that's where we got to stay to get our kids to open up to what's possible, because they're are they stuck in the material. Yikes. And you can't say anything to them, You really can't.
Well, I see a lot of children that are different here, and it might be because of being in the islands and they have different values and they are being seen differently. And I'm very involved in the New Age metaphysical community, so I see some differences with these young people, although I do agree that this materialism programming has anchored very firmly in our society. But as it becomes less and less a reality that you can get what you want, because people are poor, there's no more middle class, then they're moving away from materialism because they're not getting what they want anyway. They just can't afford it.
Yeah, but they're on the cell phone. They're on the cell phone, or they're playing cell phone games.
Seem like their cell phones. I have a young man, he's 19, and what did he do? He lost his cell phone. He's living on the street. He's getting his lessons really hard about what's important about existence, because he was raised as, a pampered child, just like most American children. But when it was time for him to get on his own, he fell flat on his face. But his parents, one was in the hospital, the other one just was, she was across the country. So they just had to watch as he fell on his face And so then they eventually get rescued. But, not all parents are just supporting their kids till they're 40.
Yeah, I know. I have a kid in Ghana, Africa, who is an orphan. All of his family died in the last couple of years. His grandma, his mother, his father is a blind beggar, and so I help him cope because he's been through malaria a couple of times, and he lives in a part of Africa where famine is the usual game, and the kid's 20 years old and he weighs 110 pounds. I don't even want to ask how tall he is. And those kids see tragedy and hunger and stuff every day that we can't even imagine. And it's a good lesson for me. I'm learning a lot from this boy about hope and faith, and he's got his little car wash, and that's how he makes a living now, is washing cars. And so, my kid, Kassim, in Ghana, is my youngest kid now. My second youngest is 28, and he's in the Army, a West Point graduate and an officer. And so, when your kids grow up, what do? You go grab somebody else's kid and raise them too.
Right. That's all we can do. We're down to 4 minutes, so what would we like to say in the final 4 minutes of our show?
Well, I've had fun. And I hope that we didn't talk about all those drawings and photographs and plates and stuff that I put up, which simply document that everything that Sasha has written about Enlil and Enki is just as right as rain and true as it can be. And what we need to do is inform the younger generation that no, history is not 6,000 years old. No, civilization didn't come from nowhere. No, we didn't evolve from monkeys, but we really do have a history. And the history is very interesting, and the history informs us about civil behavior from two different perspectives. One is from behavior, and the other is from affinity and hierarchy and secrecy and the hidden hand of elitism and leadership that way. There's so much to share with younger people that they're not getting. I wake up in the middle of the night and think of ideas. It's just, there's just really so much. There's so much. So I've had a good...
Yeah. Well, go ahead. You've had a good time. Go ahead.
And that's about it. I'm done for tonight. And
all right.
Hey, we'll talk about what the topic will be next time. I'll give you some ideas, but you give me your ideas.
On QuarionRadio.com, and I did put the pictures up with tonight's episode. I'm going to put the link as soon as the show's over. I can add the link so you can send this to the archives. Sasha, you have any final words?
I have a word about young people. I find that when I ask young people questions like, what were you doing before you were born? And just listen to the way they say things. It's not before they are too heavily programmed. You can learn a lot.
Yes, you can.
It's a good idea.
Now, to try to get things kind of straightened away and people's heads going in the direction back and forth between history and now, I gave you links to 2 books. One is Civil Life and Galactic History, which is kind of the basic history text that I've kind of copied out and cited the authors, the basic history of our galaxy. That's a black and white book, and it's fairly cheap. And the other one, Come Let Us Make Man in Our Image, has 40 color plates. It's a 8.5 by 11 picture book. It fits really well on somebody's coffee table to show to your children or your teenagers. So those are the 2 links I gave you to my most recent books. So maybe they will be of some use to somebody.
Well, excellent. All right, well, we're running out of time, so thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight, and we will continue the dialogue next week on We the Anunnaki on Fridays, from 3 to 6 Hawaii, 6 to 8 Pacific time. So do convert that for your time zone. And aloha, love, and blessings from Janet Karen Lesson and Dr. Sasha Lesson and Emily Winter Cragg.
Thank you. Good night.